Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. If you could be bringing yourselves to order. Good evening, I am Councillor Clive English, Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to this meeting. The meeting will be broadcast live to our many thousands of viewers around the world, but if you are recording it or intending to record it yourself, could you let me know? No, in that case that's fine. That wasn't to stop anyone, that's just so that we knew whether it was going on or not. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building should that be necessary. Can I ask that everyone turns their mobile phones either off or to silent in order not to interrupt the meeting? And if you are going to speak, could you please A, use your microphones and B, turn them off when you finish speaking, please. So without further ado, move on to the meeting. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have them from Councillor Gooch, Councillor Hinder and Councillor Hasty. Are there any others? Item 2, substitute members. Are there any substitute?
Councillor Forecast for Councillor Hinder.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? No? That's urgent items. Right. There are no urgent items. There were minutes circulated, but I think there's been a slight problem with those minutes, so they are when we get to the item on the minutes, I'll explain that. So there are no urgent items. Item 4, visiting members. Can't see any visiting members here. So item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members and officers? Item 6, disclosures of lobbying. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? Item 7, to consider whether any item should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. There are no substantive items. There would have been a Part 2 minute, but given the amount of information that has been in the public domain and subsequently came into the public domain, the minute was able to be all placed in Part 1, so there isn't a Part 2 exempt minute, so I hope people understand that. So there are no exempt items. Item 8, well, there has been a minor hiccup, which in terms that the wrong version of the minutes was actually circulated for members' perusal on Monday. These things do happen. As it is very close to the meeting, and what we are proposing to do is to actually not approve those minutes this evening, but to actually send out the correct copy in time for the next meeting so that members can actually see that in advance. Is that agreed? Thank you, members. Sorry about that. Item 9, there are no petitions. I see there are a number of local residents here. Are they here to ask a question? No? Or are I just observing? Okay. No questions from local residents. And as far as I'm aware, there are no questions from members of the council. Item 12, Cabinet Forward Plan. This is on pages 1 to 10 of the agenda. Has anyone any comments or questions on the Cabinet Forward Plan? If there are no questions or comments, can I take Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am relieved to see on page 5 that there is a Maidstone local bus focus group now included on the forward plan. I note that I have heard some comment around this to the effect that it lacks sufficient teeth or indeed focus on concrete outcomes, which concerns me. We also need similar subgroups for walking and cycling of a similar nature, and that all of these things need to actively and energetically inform the Joint Transportation Board. And I hope that such energy can be brought to this, even in the remaining months of this council, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Blackmore.
Chairman, would you mind if I made a comment about the local bus focus group, because it did come to the committee a few weeks ago?
By all means.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, you're absolutely right to raise issues over it. However, it was either we join the forum or we don't. And if we don't join the forum, we're not part of it, then we're not actually at the table. So I think the outcome from the Planning and Infrastructure Policy Advisory Committee was to say we will be part of it. We will do our best to promote Maidstone in this forum. But if we feel it doesn't work, then we will raise that at the appropriate time. But equally, this is the same for other districts across Kent. It's either a take it or leave it. And if we leave it, then we don't have any seat at the table. So I think, please be assured that the Planning and Infrastructure Policy Advisory Committee are keeping an eye on it.
Thank you very much. I'll share both members' concerns. In fact, I was due to ask a question about it at full council this evening, tomorrow evening, but events rather overtook that question. And well, as Councillor Blackmore says, it's better to at least make a start on it. But I suspect that we will be looking to try and tweak the arrangements, because they don't look very satisfactory. But something is better than nothing. Anyway, if there are no further comments on that report, can we note the Cabinet Forward Plan? Thank you very much. Yes, I just wanted to get that vote done. Councillor Cannon, now you've arrived, do you have any disclosures or declarations of lobbying?
Nothing to declare, and apologies for my lateness. Thank you.
Moving on to item 13, at least you didn't have to make an expensive call to a hotline to find that out. So, moving on to item 13, committee work programme, pages 11 to 16. If you'd like, we've got a couple of, if we can just take the urgent update first on the ITS, would you be so kind if you wanted to say anything? Okay, in that case, just wanted to check whether the officer wanted to say anything at this point. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I note the advice from officers to move the integrated transport strategy item out, and I find that advice very disappointing. This is based on the fact that there's a document out for consultation with the local plan review inspector. That document, which includes elements of the integrated transport strategy, actually, I would have felt it would have been better for us to review this before he reviewed that document and put it out to consultation, because there's a number of items in that document which are clearly not correct at this point. We've got things like £1 million shown on page 80, showing £1 million allocated for the Cripple Street at Borton Lane, Swan Junction. Now, if we'd have had a chance to review this, we would have known from the Joint Transport Board that KCC have now cancelled that programme. So we're actually showing the inspector via this document quite an ambitious plan, a very substantial plan at the wheat sheaf, But again, from the Joint Transport Board, we know that we closed Cranbourne Avenue, even though there were 73 of the 96 respondents that did not want it to be closed. And KCC is now promoting a due minimum plan at that junction, when in actual fact there's significant funds that have been collected for a major reconfiguration of that junction, and £500,000 has been invested in the pub to allow that scheme to progress. So I really feel that Maidstone should have done more due diligence in making sure that that document was actually current with what's going on with KCC's perspective and what may happen and what may not happen. But the reason this was brought to the Scrutiny Committee was really to do with the fact that we own our local plan process. The local plan process comes with an integrated transport strategy, and unfortunately, we had the adopted local plan in 2017. We got funding for all of these junction schemes many years ago. We're showing in the document that's out to consultation that work will begin in summer 2021 and delivered across a 12-month period. Why on earth we're putting that out to public consultation, I really don't understand. Again, I'll come back to the fact that we really should be reviewing this before the inspector saw this document. But we own the local plan process. It has a troubled infrastructure plan. We go to joint transport. I went last week. It was a cut and paste of a list of junctions. It didn't list where we are in terms of funds. The Keep Maidstone Moving showed that we collected £13.9 million, the best part of 10 years ago. It doesn't show where that money is going to be spent, whether there's a gap, whether inflation has taken a hold of it and some of these schemes can't be delivered now. So I find it shocking that we've got this housing delivery that's going on full force, and we've got an infrastructure plan in the local plan update, which is essentially a cut and paste from the adopted plan 2017. And many of the schemes that we're showing as mitigation with the local plan and the local plan review aren't even going to happen. Now, as I say, I feel we should be reviewing this, and I would like to make a proposal that we do bring this back as a report at our next session, and we review a scope of where we move forward with this item in scrutiny.
I think it's a bit like the curate's egg, what you just said, Councillor Clark. Bits which I agree with and bits that procedurally I sympathise with, but which just can't happen. Right, like it or not, and I don't particularly like it, but we are where the local plan outcome has been delayed. The consultation, admittedly, the consultation the inspector is now undertaking is largely on technical aspects of a number of the highway schemes. So they're not on the substantive schemes themselves, or largely on the technical aspects of whether some of the work can actually be delivered and over what timescale that delivery should take place. Nevertheless, we got to be careful of not setting off to review something that could be altered by the inspector in his report. So we, at best, that would mean that we've wasted our time and officers' time reviewing something that's been changed by the inspector's report, which we haven't had, although we have had some feedback on it. Or worse, that we totally confuse the lines. What I do agree with is I think that we could, without actually doing the review itself, we could actually usefully scope what the questions are, and I think we could do that. And I think there would be some merit in doing that at the next meeting. What I believe it has proved the case with scrutiny over the last couple of years is that you lose the first 3 months of any given municipal year to thinking about what we're going to think about and then doing the scoping review. It would probably save time, and we would probably have a better idea of what we're going to do if we actually did sit down and actually scope out what the questions should be, not the answers, the questions. I think you've raised some very good questions at the next meeting of this committee, and that will probably save us about 2 or 3 months at the start of the next municipal year. So I actually think there is some merit in that, and I think that it's not a question of just looking at the junction improvements that have or haven't been done, though. I think this issue around where we go with the bus partnership, where we go with the walking and cycling strategy, these are all parts of a proper integrated transport strategy and all questions we should ask. So I do think we should try and scope out the questions. I don't think, personally, and this is just my personal opinion, that it's going to actually work. After you rang me, I did actually go and have a look at again, and I think it's going to be quite difficult to actually substantively review the integrated transport strategy before we do a scoping review anyway. So I think we should do the scoping exercise for the next meeting. That's my personal opinion. I'll let you come back, Councillor Clark.
There are two things here. I made a comment about the local plan. I mean, in the minutes of last meeting, the draft minutes, it actually said that this was not expected to impact the start date of the ITS review and scrutiny. So I haven't had a chance to see the actual ones, but if that is not expected to impact the start date of this item, I don't see how that's changed. I made a comment about the inspector's report, but this is a programme that was given the green light many years ago, and we have totally failed to deliver it. It's something called Maidstone Moving. It's called Maidstone's Integrated Transport Package. It was in our adopted local plan. So even though we may look at what's going on with the update, this was actually something that was signed off with the local plan that was adopted in 2017, and we have totally failed to deliver it. And if that doesn't warrant scrutiny, I don't know what does.
I don't think I was suggesting that we don't scrutinise it. I think I was suggesting that we try and scrutinise it by doing the scoping review at the next meeting and saving ourselves 3 months. Councillor Blackmore.
I have to say, Chairman, I thought we voted on this particular item to say there is a particular order in which this needs to happen. And if I remember correctly, many members spoke against it but for it. So they didn't like the fact of the timeline, but they accepted it. Because if we do this in the wrong order, then it does jeopardise the local plan timeline. And whatever any of us think, we cannot do that. We would not be serving our residents well. So, as with the Chairman, I have to say, Chairman, I agree with you on this item. And in lots of ways, Councillor Clark, I agree with you too. But even so, I think we have to make sure we honour the timeline. And on this occasion, I think that does have to come first. But we have actually been over this item on previous occasions, and I think the committee did agree to accept it in this format.
If I can come back on the substantive quote you just had, I think that's not actually accurate. It does impact. That minute is not correct. We should have corrected that there. I think if I can just check with Ms. Parfitt. Yeah, she's telling me that's correct. That is an error in recording there. I'm going to propose to move this forward, that we bring a full scoping report to the next meeting of this committee. Okay? Well, look, is that agreed? Thank you. We are going on to health next, health inequalities. Right, this is a very important subject. I know it's dear to everyone's heart, including the Chief Executive's, and that's probably one of the reasons she's here. Did you want to say anything on this, Mrs. Broom? Just asking if you wanted to. Okay, fine. Right, we have a fairly much fuller report on this. Has everyone had the chance to read this? Which sets out some lines of inquiry. All I would say is that, to me, a particular priority in this is actually the housing element of it. So I would say that we do probably need someone from the private sector housing team.
Yeah, sorry, I'm happy to wait till you finish. I just wanted to contribute on this.
So if we could, I think we need the officers from the, or at least an officer from the private sector housing team and a list of people we're going to talk to, if at all possible. Then I'll hand over to Councillor Cleater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The health inequality now, it's never been more needed for us to scope out and do this review. There are a level of cuts coming from another place that are going to severely impact on the mental well-being of young people. There's going to be gatekeeping of services that will affect our elderly, and I absolutely agree. Some of the crisis we're having in housing at the moment, my caseload and that of Councillor Wilkinson, because we tend to have the estates where it's major golden homes, we're in the ridiculous situation where people who are overcrowded in a 2-bedroom place are being told they cannot apply for a 3-bedroom because it'll make it overcrowded. So you've just got to stay, honestly. So it is an absolute nightmare at the moment. But the housing stock that we have in the private sector, some of it is truly, truly shocking of what we're seeing. And part of having a healthy, vibrant community is what we can do as an authority, but also holding others to account. And I'm afraid at the moment, the level of cuts that are coming, the level of cuts that are happening in the NHS, the inability to get an appointment, it is falling on boroughs and districts to pick up the slack. And to be quite blunt, we don't have the resources. So we need to have and scrutinise this so we can identify and scope where the problems are. And if we have to hold people to account, we will do so. Now, to be fair to Golding, because I've mentioned them, actually we have a pretty good relationship with them, and we're more likely to get results via their way of engaging with local members than we do, for example, with Hyde and Town and Country, etc. But the other thing we need to factor into this is the level of London boroughs who are transferring people with absolute core needs, health needs, mental health needs. We're not getting their budget for social care, and we're not getting the budget for their health, and it's also overwhelming our NHS in terms of GP. That is not their fault. It's not their fault at all. But this system we have at the moment, where office blocks are being bought up or rented out by London boroughs, it's failing to meet the needs of their residents, and it's also impacting on the services that we delivered. So I would welcome the ability to scope this, because we're doing what we can to relieve the problem, but I think we need to have a real good deep dive on what the issues are, what we can do as an authority, and what pressure we can put to bear on people in other sectors to deliver what they need to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cleater. That's very, very useful. Just an observation, after we gave Golding some publicity about improving their communications with MPs and councillors, MHS have also started doing the same thing. And I have to say it works really well. And recently went round and looked at some of the refurbishments in Allen Place in Fairmeadow, where there have been a few issues, which they have completely resolved, it has to be said. And if only we can nudge Hyde and one or two of the other extremely hard to communicate companies in the same direction, we would have achieved a significant result, even if that's all we achieved, because the change in Golding and MHS, now you can contact them easily, is quite amazing. I mean, in the past, just give you a little example, Midhurst Court lifts often fail, and we've had, used to have terrible problems getting them to fix them. And with the new reporting system, it was done in under 2 days, which is quite remarkable given they had to order the replacement parts and send them through the post. So there we go. Any further comments on this? No? So we will have 2 quite forward scoping reports at the next meeting, assuming we agree to do that for this report. Is that agreed? Councillor Round, sorry.
Just one small issue. Can I make sure that the focus on housing actually also includes the Gypsy and Traveller community, please?
There are clearly issues with the Gypsy and Traveller community, not least the fact that we have still not got our own private, a new public sector site, which means that whatever we do with the private sector G&T strategy is going to fall over. But I take your point. It's a major area of work just by itself, but it probably does need addressing. Anyway, I agree to bring those 2 reports to the next committee. Thank you. Talking about reports, we come now to the last item. It's been pointed out that this is almost a fraudulent report, given that the photograph is hardly accurate anymore. It was accurate at one time. Councillor Webb.
I'd just like to point out that the picture of Mrs. Cleater I thought was very true to life.
Well, thank you, Councillor Webb. I feel even more put in my place now. May I say that thank Olivia for her work and Councillor Cleater for her input on this. We have an annual report. It's short and to the point, which I think is actually for the best when you've got an annual report. It's fair to say it's been a different year than the first year we did, which was more focused on overview. This has been a year more about pre-decision scrutiny, which is still an important part of the role. I would observe that I'm very glad that we did the environmental enforcement review and cleared up on that, because there have been some issues that have come to light and some prosecutions and actions that this council will need to take. We photographed a major retailer's staff fly tipping directly into the River Len last week. So I won't mention which retailer it is, but you can probably guess. And so, that just shows when you've got companies of that size fly tipping directly into a river, it just shows how important it is for this council to get a grip on environmental crime, because it's not just casual happenings and people in white vans doing this. It's quite large establishment concerns, and that's very worrying. Councillor Blackmore.
Chairman, I trust that that was suitably publicised across all forms of media for Maidstone Borough Council, bearing in mind it's quite an important issue and has always been raised by frequent members, especially in the rural areas. So I trust we got a lot of coverage about that.
We have. I just want to make another observation. One of the recommendations was that we seek more publicity for our environmental and planning enforcement. I know not everyone gets Planning Magazine, which is a national magazine for councillors and mostly officers and development consultants involved in planning. Maidstone Borough Council had the front page lead in this national magazine 2 weeks ago because of our criminal proceedings against a gentleman who fly tipped extensively on the North Downs, and we won a case at which he got, amongst other things, a 4-month prison sentence. So that has been publicised quite significantly in a number of outlets. The KM, I know, published it, and it was in the national planning magazines as well. So it's good to see that we are being more proactive about telling people what enforcement action we're undertaking, both in the planning and the environmental field. And congratulations to the officers concerned. Any further questions, comments on the annual report or any of the work we've done this last year? Or no, in that case, can we agree the... Oh, Councillor Thompson, my apologies.
Try not to hog the meeting, Mr. Chairman. If I can make some slightly more informal comments, please. I agree that the work with Officer Stevens and Edwards and McIver was a highlight of our year's work, and I think I want to observe that while not directly related to the sessions held here, as I think you're aware, it enabled me, I was facilitated in my ability to understand what it was that I was able to do as a ward councillor in regard to dealing with environmental issues generally and waste crime in particular. The awareness of who is responsible for what, who the post holders are, who the officers are, what their remit is, was more than invaluable. I'm trying to drive forward the point here that we need to, I think, communicate this more widely around the council to see how it is that all members should be brought to understand what the capacity of our council is. As I have observed variously, residents complain to us, they throw their hands up in despair, they accuse us of being ineffectual and other less complimentary things. Knowing actually how the processes work is important, and we made some steps forward, I think, in the meetings that we had here. I was then able to go on to be part of some specific meetings around some specific issues with some of those officers at the MBC depot on the basis of that increased understanding that I had. So I think that I want to say that the work of overview and scrutiny has facilitated my ability to be an effective councillor elsewhere, and others in doing so. I think that's an important thing that needs to be looked at going forwards as to how we assist councillors in being effective, as well as the council as a whole in doing so. Having said those things, I do regret that some of the other items that we have considered, and I note Councillor Clark's comments earlier, as well as other items here in the list on the second page of this report, where things haven't started, things have been paused and so forth. Is our river and water courses any cleaner than they were 12 months ago as a result of our efforts? I'm not optimistic that those things have happened, and I would just want to say that I regret that we haven't been more effective as a council, and I think that we need to take a good hard look at seeing what overview and scrutiny does in fact result in concrete terms for things that we all agree need to be done for the benefit of the borough, clean water not being least of those things. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Chairman.
I would observe that to an extent, when you do a big overview like we did on water cycle, that some of the results do take a while to come through. So I think we shouldn't rush to judgment and say whether or not it's been a success or not. One of the major landmarks, which partly came out of that review and partly came out of earlier actions, we'll see next week, because there was a meeting about the deculverting of the River Len, which will be a major step forward. If that in fact does happen on schedule, be a major step forward towards implementing some of the recommendations. Again, some of the others are medium term, so we're not going to know immediately whether or not they are happening. All I can say is that there have been some disagreements with some members of the Cabinet on how to take some of these things forward, but where we do agree, I think, is that they do need to be taken forward. And so some of these are still works in progress and will be returned to. What has been regrettable is that one or two of the national stakeholders have not engaged. The ones that we engaged with in tranche one, and possibly they were in tranche one because they were the ones that were willing to engage at that stage, were very productive. But we all know the problems with the Environment Agency, who have been basically starved of staff and funding. by successive governments. It's not just this government, it's been several governments. We are not going to give up on that, but it would have been pointless to just keep issuing the same invites, so we had to proceed with other work. But believe you me, Councillor Thompson, no one's given up on the implementation of these, and I anticipate that whatever administration there is next year that will want to address this issue, although, you know, quite how it's addressed, there will be some discussion and debate over. Councillor Round.
Sorry, just to really emphasise the point, I've been at a planning appeal today, and I won't go into too much detail about the applicant and the type of thing it is, but what it is a planning application in a flood zone. And the Environment Agency said it was flood zone 3, and they still didn't attend, and they still didn't give a confirming affirmative report one way or another. And because this application was also in a flood zone, it was next to a triple SI, Natural England didn't turn up, and the Medway Drainage Board didn't turn up. So I have to endorse what the Chair's just said. We can scrutinise and we can probe and we can challenge and we can be the best councillors or the worst councillors, but we're still in the hands of so many other people when we choose to look for some form of direction or advice. And we can, as I say, we can try and try, but we're not even as good as the others because we can't rely on the others. And I know full well the Democratic Service Officer was totally committed to that and worked their butt off for it. So it's just one of those things.
Having said that, you know, we're not giving up on it, and neither of the officer. And I have to endorse what Councillor Round just said there. Olivia, in particular, has worked tremendously hard this last year again, as she did the year before, on delivering some of these things, and also welcome some of our new members who have begun to work quite hard on some of these issues too, Cassie. So welcome, and thank you for everything that's been done. So can we, with noting our thanks to our officer team for their consistent support, which I have to say is the one omission from this report, and I have to, and I will say that is the one thing that isn't in the report. You were doubtless too modest to add it, but I would say that we should but because it isn't in the report, I would like it officially recorded that we would not have been in the minutes, that we would not have been able to deliver this report, but for the officer's assistance. Thank you. And please, you have to write that down. And if it's not in the minutes, we get a bit annoyed. So with that, is it the report agreed? And that additional minute note agreed? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I now close the meeting and shall head off rapidly to Beerstead.